welcome to CEC lectures. Myself Dr. Preeti Jagmani from Department of Computer Science, Aryabat College, University of Delhi. Now in our previous lecture we have seen about the process of designing a database, and we have seen the first step in order to design a database is to understand the requirements of the users. Then the second step is about the modeling, and the third step is about the conversion of that particular data model into the we can say actual database. And in the second step, which was about the modeling, we were going through the details of entity relationship diagram, which is a modeling tool or which is a modeling technique, I can say. And we have seen that there are three building blocks of this entity relationship diagram. One is the entity, second is the attribute, and third one is the relationship. And now if we can see entity, that is something which is distinguishable and distinguishable from one another, and something that exists, and we have also seen how to identify these entities. Now in order to represent these entities within or in the way in which we are going to show these entities within an ER diagram is actually with the help of a rectangle, as I have told you in the last lecture also. So entity sets can be represented graphically as follows. In the previous lecture we have also seen the difference between entity and an entity set. So here the rectangular box, which is named as instructor, is representing the entity set, the complete entity set. What about the attributes? The attributes are listed inside the entity rectangle. So in case of an instructor, there are attributes. One is the ID, another one is the name, and third one is the salary. While if you can see, in the case of an student entity set, there are three attributes, which are ID, name, and total credits. And here whichever is the primary key, that primary key has to be underlined. So in case of an instructor, there is an ID which is the primary key of this entity set. That's why this ID has been underlined here, if you can see. Similarly, in case of the student, ID is also similarly in the case of a student also, the ID is underlined, because ID is we can say something which is the primary key, or is the attribute which is the primary key of the student entity set. So this is the way in which we are going to represent our entity sets, and in which we are going to represent our attributes also. So now in our previous lecture we have seen that how to find the entities. Now in order to see how to find these attributes, let us first of all try to understand what actually an attribute is in with reference to entity when we talk about. So attributes are basically something, or these properties which are there to identify or describe the entity. So basically we can in a simple language we can say attributes are the properties of entity, or more specifically we can say it is a descriptor whose values are associated with individual entities of any specific entity type. So basically these are something which are there to describe the entities. Now how are we going to identify the attributes? We need to look for the terms which appear to be descriptive noun phrases. So for example, in case of an student, what all could be the attributes? A student can be represented with the help of student ID. It he or she can be represented with the help of the first name, last name, date of birth, and the major faculty or the major subject which he or she has opted for. So here the student ID, the first name, last name, and date of birth, and also the major are attributes of this entity set while the student ID, which has been kind of, we can say, underlined here, is the primary key of this particular entity set, which is named as a student. So, a student here is an entity, or we can say entity set. The more the more technical terminology, or the more correct terminology here is the entity set, but for the sake of convenience we always say that a student is an entity here. Then it is having a student ID as its primary key. Apart from that, it is having first name, last name, date of birth, and major, which is the subject. And all these attributes are, we can say, something which are properties of a student. So, each and every student is having all these 5 properties, and existence of all these 5 different properties make one student distinguishable from another students. So, these attributes, we can say, are there to describe the detailed information about an entity, and we have seen the now let us take example of an employee. The example of a student we have seen just now. Now let us take the example of an entity employee. What all could be the attributes of this entity? One is the employee name. Obviously there is going to be an employee name, then an employee ID, then an address, which is going to be a composite attribute. Now what is this composite attribute? I will be covering in a short while. Then it is having some kind of phone or phone number extension or something of that sort. Date of joining of organization, which we can say date of hire, then some job skill code, and its his or her salary, and so on and so forth. So all these are the attributes which are required in order to we can say, in order to represent an entity which is the employee here. Now composite attribute I was talking about, this comes under the classes, or this comes under the types of attributes. Now what are the types of attributes? This could be an attribute can be of type simple, that means a simple attribute. Then it can have an attribute can be of type composite, can be of type derived, can be of type single valued attribute, or it can be of type multi-valued attribute. So, we have simple attribute, composite attribute, derived attributes, single value attributes, and multi-value attributes. Now, let us see what all these terms means. So, simple attribute is something which cannot be further subdivided. So, for example, let us say I am talking about gender, male, female, or others, or marital status. So, marital status is either married or not married. You cannot further subdivide it. While let us say we have one attribute which is address. This address can be further subdivided into street, then city, then state, then country, then postal code, and so on and so forth. So, this state actually we can say it is a composite attribute which can be further subdivided, and for this further subdivision means having some additional attributes. Or for example, we can also have phone number divided into area code and the actual the number, and so on and so forth. So, simple attribute which cannot be further subdivided, composite attribute which can be further subdivided. Now, coming to the derived attribute. Derived attribute is something which represent an information which is not physically stored within the database. So, for example, the simplest example of the derived attribute is age. So, for example, I have kind of stored the date of birth of an employee, and now let us say if I want to find out the age, this age can be derived from the date of birth and the current date. So, in MS Access we will ask for the integer portion of the current date minus the employee date of birth divided by 365, because we are already we are only interested in the number of years and the integer part of that. So age can also be age can be either asked from the user. If not asked, it can be derived if you have the date of birth of the employee. So and current date of course is available. So with a simple calculation we can have this. Or another example of uh, a derived attribute is, let's say we are going to charge a penalty, or we are going to give a late surcharge of, let's say, 2% on some particular commodity, or to some particular client. So that is whatever the amount into uh, 0.02 is going to be the we can say uh, new a derived attribute, or the derived information which is not physically stored with the database. Now if we talk about the multi-valued attributes, so this can have many values. So for example, a person can have several college degrees and a particular house, or even it is very common to have one person with many mobile numbers, many as in like 2 or 3. So a person with 2 or 3 mobile numbers, so that mobile number in that particular case is going to have many values, multi-valued attribute, that's why it is known as or a person may have various college degrees. So education is also a multi-valued attribute. Now if we talk about single valued attribute, that means, as the name indicates, that these are not going to have values more than 1, only a single value is going to fit in here. So commonly we have single valued attributes, but yes, sometimes, as in case of qualification, or in case of mobile numbers, or in case of, let's say, if we are talking about a car company database, then this color attribute. So for example, a particular XYZ model car is coming into kind of red, blue, green and orange colors. So red, blue, green and orange are the kind of 4 values of that particular attribute, which is color. So here that color is a multi-valued attribute. So till this point we have understood about the entity, and we have also understood about the we can say attribute. What is entity, how these attributes are kind of we can say connected with, associated with these entities. And the third building block which we have not seen yet is about the relationships. So relationship is actually, we can say, it is an association between entities. Now how many entities, if we can say, it can be 2 entities, it can be more than 2 entities, and by the number of entities which are involved in a relationship, we can say the degree of relationship is determined. I will be taking this in a short while. Also these relationships could be classified in terms of cardinality. Cardinality as in like 1 to 1, or 1 to many, or many to many. That also we will be covering in a short while. Now when we talk about relationship, in case of an employee database, these employees are assigned to projects, or similarly we can say we have a relationship between instructor and student, in which the instructor is the advisor to a student. So the association between instructor and the student is of advisor, or we can say the relationship between instructor and student is of the advisor. So also we need to be very careful with the relationship, that as I have told you, that relationship is an association among entities, and how many entities are taking participate, how many entities are participating in that association is going to decide the degree of that particular relationship. So for example, we have one relationship which is advisor, that is going to instruct a particular instructor, let us say A1 with an student. Similarly, we have seen in the previous lecture, we have seen the concept of entity as well as the concept of entity set. Similarly, we have relationship set here. So, relationship set, we can say it is a mathematical relation which exists among entities more than or equals to 2, where these entities are taken from entity sets. So, for example, we have one entity set which is capital E1, and there are various entities into that E1, E2 till En, and similarly E2 is another, small e2 is another relationship which belongs to the relationship set capital E2, and so on and so forth, and we are going to take a relationship from these relationship sets. So, let us try to see what I am talking about with the help of an example. Here we have a table or an entity instructor, and another table or another entity is the student. And what is the what are the attributes? So, one is the ID and another one is the name of the instructor, while similar case with the student also student ID and the name of the student. Now, in order to we can say show the relationship of the advisor, we can we can draw the lines between these individual entities which are present inside the entity set. So, here if you can see, we are going to draw a line pictorially between these related entities. For example, 76766 crick, which is an instructor, is associated to the student with student ID 98988 and the name is Tanaka. So, there is, or from here what inference we can draw here is this is instructor crick with the instructor ID as 76766 is an advisor to this particular student whose roll number or whose ID is 98988. Now, this is a figure in which we have kind of we have shown or we have depicted that how these relationships can be can sit there. It is, this was in figure which is there in order to just make you explain, but in a formal setup when we try to show the relationship within an ER diagram, this relationship will be shown like this. So, here we have an instructor with the ID, name and salary, ID being the primary key. Then we have a student with ID, name and total credit, similarly student ID being the primary key. So, relationship in between instructor and student when depicted in an ER diagram is shown with the help of a diamond which is going to represent the relationship set, and the name of that relationship has to be written within that particular diamond. So, here if you can see, in between instructor and student there is a diamond in which the name or in which the term is written as advisor. So, here by this figure we can infer that there are two entities, instructor and student, and there is one relationship between this instructor and student, and that relationship is of advisor. So, instructor is an advisor to a particular student, and which particular student is having which all advisor, that can be taken from here, but this is, we can say, is for our own understanding only. The for entity relationship diagram in a formal setup, we are going to represent these relationships as it is shown on the screen with the help of a diamond, not with the help of only straight lines. Then when we talk about relationship set, then an attribute can also be associated with the relationship set. So, for example, we have just seen the advisor relationship, that is also can be called as advisor relationship set between the instructor and student, where instructor and student, they themselves are the entity sets and may have the attribute date which tracks when the student started being associated with the advisor. So, for example, Crick has become the advisor of Tanaka somewhere around 3rd May 2004 or something of that sort. So, here the relationship advisor is also having the attribute. So, it is not only that only your entities or your entity sets are going to possess uh, attributes for them. It could be a relationship which is going to have some attributes. So, and here the attribute of the relationship set, which is the advisor, is your date, and that date is the date in which the student started being associated with the advisor, or student has enrolled under that particular advisor. So, the bottom line here is then attribute can also be associated with the relationship set, I can say. And then how to represent this relation, attributes of the relationship. It is not like it is not like the entities that within the rectangle we are going to write the name of the attribute and it is done, as we have done in the case of instructor and student. In order to represent the attribute of a relationship set, there is a line connecting the relationship set, which is shown in the form of diamond, to a small rectangular box, or this could be an we can say an oval box also. Some we can say conventions give you a oval box for your uh, attributes. So, attribute date which is associated with the advisor is shown on the screen in the form of a rectangular box which is attached to advisor. So, we have instructor, we have students, and we have an advisor relationship with its own attributes, which is nothing but the date. Now, earlier also I have uttered one term which was about the degree of the relationship set. So, how many entities are involved in a particular relationship, that defines the degree of the relationship. So, for example, when we talk about a student and instructor, there are two entities, or that involves two entity sets. So, here the degree is going to be 2, or we can say the relationship is binary. So, wherever the degree is 2, we will be saying that relationship is binary, and most of the relationships in the database systems are binary. That really does not mean that we are not going to have any other degree other than binary. So, this is you can have tertiary relationship also. So, tertiary relationship could be let us say the relationship is the project guide, which is there between the instructor, student and the project. So, which project has been taken by which student and which instructor is guiding that particular project, all these things will be represented with the help of relationship set, which is the project guide, because here students work on the research projects under the guidance of instructors. Although these relationships with more than two entities are rare, but yes, they exist, and there can be ternary relationships also. Most of the relationships are binary, and here is the example of representation of a ternary relationship, or we can say relationship which is not binary. So, this relationship, which is project guide, shown in the diamond box, is kind of we can say attached to or linked to three entities. One entity is project. No specific attributes of this project are shown here, but here definitely project is going to have some domain, some area, some name, title kind of thing, and some project code and something of that sort. So, project itself is an entity that, and so are your instructor and students, and all these three entities are connected or associated using a relationship, and that relationship is nothing but named as project guide. And this here you can see it is a non binary relationship set, it is a ternary relationship set. So, here the we can say degree of the relationship is 3, while in the earlier example of your kind of only this instructor and student, the relationship is actually the binary relationship. Now, apart from this degree of the relationship, we can have number of occurrences in one entity which are associated with the number of occurrences in another, that is represented by cardinality. So, for example, if we are talking about the advisor, and there is a rule that only one instructor can advise only one student. So, that means one occurrence of the entity instructor will be associated with one occurrence of the student, or it could be another thing that one instructor can guide many students. So, there will be one instructor, one occurrence of the instructor entity can be associated with many occurrences of the student entity. So, this is what the number of occurrences in which one entity is associated with the number of occurrences of another. This is what you called cardinality, and there are three basic cardinalities, one to one, then we have one to many, and another one is many to many. So, basically three we can say types of three basic cardinalities, one to one to many. I have given you example of both, and there is also kind of many to many. So, for example, I can say the relationship teaching. So, there are many teachers teaching the students, and the students are being taught by one particular student is being taught by more than one teachers, for obviously for different courses, and one teacher is also kind of teaching more than one students in an obvious scenario. So, that kind of relationship is actually called we can say many to many. And if we are going to represent these relationship with their cardinality types, so when we represent one to one relationship, the symbol is given only a straight line is being drawn. If a one to many relationship is to be kind of shown, there is a kind of a crow foot symbol on the side of many occurrences, and if there is a many to many relationship which is represented by m to n, the crow foot notation is being used on both sides of the entities. So, here in this lecture we have studied about the relationships, their entities, their cardinalities, and in the before that we have also seen what are attributes, how to find attributes, what are the types of attributes, and in this way we have covered the three building blocks of entity relationship diagrams, which are entities, relationships and attributes. And here is a list of references which is being used for the preparation of the lecture. More on the entity relationship diagrams in our upcoming lectures. Hope you have enjoyed this. Thank you for a patient hearing.